This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and dealing with some of the stuff that gets in the way of it. You can subscribe on the Hope 1032 YouTube channel to see video versions of some of these interviews, and make sure you rate and review where you're listening. It just helps other people find the show as well. Technology devices, they are very much now an inevitable and beneficial part of life. We know, though, it can be a challenge to balance the upsides of all of our smart devices with the impacts that they have on our well-being, particularly when screen time, our need to be connected, becomes all-consuming. Dr. Kristy Goodwin is a digital wellbeing and neuro productivity speaker. She has a new book out, Dear Digital, We Need to Talk, a guilt-free guide to taming your tech habits and thriving in a distracted world. I invited Kristy onto the show to talk about how we can embrace the good of technology in our work and personal lives, while also putting boundaries in place that allow us, and kids, if you've got them as well, to be anchored in our human experience too. Let's thank Kristy for coming on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
One of the things you do really well in your career is help people navigate both the reality of our digital world and also our need as individuals to perform well, to be, sound, healthy humans. This idea of peak performance, particularly in our digital age, what does that look like to you for us to be, at the height of performance?
Yes, and I had somebody describe me the other day as a pracademic, and at first I was a little offended. I thought they meant like I was practically an academic, but what they meant was I'm practical and an academic. So I'm really passionate about taking research and science and making it applicable, realistic, and relevant. So really important. I think that peak performance to me looks like us certainly living in a digital landscape. It's not about going on a digital detox. It's not about cancelling your Netflix subscription. It's not about aiming for inbox zero. I think they're outdated, unrealistic strategies. It's all about how can we start to use the technologies that we are all dependent on now, both professionally and personally, but do so in a way that is aligned, in a way that is congruent with how our brains and bodies are designed. So peak performance in a digital age means having a healthy and productive relationship with technology, but where we're using it in a way that is congruent with our operating system, which I call our HOS, our human operating system, which is our brain and our body.
It's good to, I think, frame that up as we start, because I think so many people, particularly when you look at the hustle culture that we exist in and the digital CEOs and all of this type of thing, to be performing well can so easily be thought of as always being on, always being, available, never having your phone away from you. How do you find success in the, the space we live in with some of those limitations, right, without being available all the time?
That's right. And unfortunately, we have some biological constraints. As humans, we have like a biological blueprint that we have to adhere to. So I agree completely that hustle, always on, busy, tethered to technology culture that we see permeating our lives today is actually the exact opposite of how we should be operating. So a quick example is that the part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, that helps us solve problems, think analytically, it's our working memory, our impulse control center. I often liken it to being the CEO of our brains. Our prefrontal cortex has between its estimated 4 to 6 hours of battery life a day, pardon the pun. So 4 to 6 hours per day where we can do deep thinking, critical work, the higher order thinking skills. We are not biologically designed to sit down and work and work and work for 12 and 14-hour days. We're actually working against our brains and bodies. Equally, working for long stretches of time without having regular breaks. And regular breaks need to be opportunities where we digitally disconnect. Opportunities where we put our phone down and go for a walk. I don't know about you, Laura, but I've had my best ideas in the shower, when I've been swimming. Never have I had a great idea in my inbox or in an Excel spreadsheet, like never. So it's critical that we start to adhere to these sort of biological rhythms and start working the way we're designed.
It really shocks me to think that we only have 4 to 6 hours of that deep work available to us. Do you think that means because we have a 24-hour day. Obviously, we sleep for a chunk of that. But if we can only be doing that real deep work for such a limited amount of it, what are we meant to be doing with the rest?
So a lot of the other time is doing shallow work. So please don't get me into trouble if you are listening to this and taking it to your boss and saying, this lady called Kristy said I should have a 4 to 6 hour work day. That is not what I'm suggesting. People are freaking out about the 4-day work week, let alone someone else saying a 4 to 6 hour work day. No, we can work for longer, but we can't do the heavy lifting, like the cognitively demanding work for really more than 6 hours at a day. So this means a couple of things. We need to also allocate some of the shallow work. Some of you may be familiar with Cal Newport's concepts of deep and shallow work. So shallow work in contrast is our less demanding, less taxing, tends to be more administrative type tasks. So the key here is that we really have to structure our days to optimize that window. And it may not be a 4 to 6 hour straight period. For most of us, it's working in a sprint, having a break, and it will also adjust according to something called our chronotype. And our chronotype is basically, it determines when we're most focused and alert. It's a gene that we carry, and it determines our optimal or our peak performance window of the day. So we're either early birds or our peak performance rises in the middle of the day or late in the evening. That's where we have to be really diligent about building a fortress around our focus. And in that period, eliminating as many distractions as possible, and also trying to structure our day so we can get that heavy lifting done when we're most likely to be in that sort of focused, alert state.
Does the way that we apply this vary across industries? Because some, very corporate environments, I feel like probably lend themselves well to structure, but then maybe in an education environment or in a media environment or different, spaces like that, structure's not always available to us.
Totally. And there are nuances across industries. A lot of teachers say, I would love to have more flexibility around when I work, but I'm bound to a 9 to 3 work day. So we often don't have that much. Some industries don't have that flexibility, but we've often got flexibility around when we're allocating types of tasks to our day. So, and again, we all might have extra work we might need to catch up on the weekend. So rather than dedicating our whole weekend to it, could we optimize that time? So there's ways of going about it. It is very much contingent also upon your role within an organization. If you're in a customer service role, you may not have the liberty of sort of choosing when you do your hours because you may need to be responsive to clients' needs. So yes, there is some nuances in this conversation, but I think the benefit of the pandemic, particularly for knowledge workers, is that I think a lot of the conversation has been around flexibility and especially around location flexibility. And I think that's great. But I think the more powerful dialogue is around schedule flexibility, like having more locus of control over when we work. It was estimated that before the pandemic, 88% of knowledge workers had work schedules that conflicted with their chronotypes. We've now got much more flexibility, again, depending on your organization and your role, but a greater locus of control over when we do particular types of tasks as well.
And at least there's more openness to the conversation, right? Even if it can't be exactly how your ideal day might look, there's certainly an ability to say, I think this could work, or we could do this way, and people will be, slightly more open to the concept.
Yeah, and the good news is you only need to make small adjustments and you'll reap huge benefits. McKinsey & Co did a study several years ago, and at the time, most knowledge workers were only spending about 5% of their work week doing their deep work in their sort of chronotype's peak time. They bumped that up to just 20%. So the equivalent of basically having one full day of the week where you were optimizing your performance. Productivity increased by a whopping 55%.
Wow.
So just those small tweaks can have a really profound impact, and it doesn't have to be all the time. We don't live in some sort of utopia where we live these rigid schedules that don't bend and flex. But if we can make those adjustments, the benefits are huge for everyone, both employees and employers as well.
Yeah, and I think the human side of us living in this digital world as well, like we always create lines between ourselves as humans and then kind of, digital beings. And you need to have a level of humanity in it. Like you say, we can't be kind of robots doing things in such a regimented way. But coming back to the neurological side for a second, we do often talk about the clash between how we work biologically and the information age that we live in. Are there any ways where technology, using our phones, all of this sort of stuff actually supports our biological function in a positive way?
Yeah, I think there are things we can certainly do. So, for example, we know sleep is a core biological function, and we also know many of us are not getting good quality and quantity of sleep. And there's absolutely no denying that our tech habits are contributing to that. You know, being on a blue lit screen in the 60 minutes before you go to sleep has been proven to have a huge impact on the onset of sleep. So when you do finally fall asleep, we also now know it's having a huge impact on the quality of your sleep. So we know that blue light really shrinks our deep and REM sleep. But we've now got technologies that can work for us. So we can, on our laptops and desktops, use some software that automatically adjusts the blue light. So if we do have to work at night, if we've got to check our emails or we're dealing with a deadline, we can use on our laptop or our desktop a piece of software that automatically syncs with our clock and will automatically adjust the brightness of the screen, so we're not absorbing as much blue light. Most of our phones now have inbuilt settings that we do need to set up, and this is the problem. They're often not as default settings, but set up where you can activate do not disturb mode, where you can adjust the blue light so it automatically shifts at a certain time of the day. So I think there are increasingly more technologies, but the trick is we have to often program them or set them up. You know, another really simple one that I know so many people are struggling with at the moment is just the constant digital bombardment of alerts and notifications.
Yeah.
Like, turn them off, or on Slack or Teams, put it on focus mode. Create an autoresponder. There are things we can do, I think, that start to work in more alignment with our biology as well. But the onus is on us actually programming them to do that.
Yeah, we need to take a minute to learn all of the settings. But you talk about setting up sort of digital guardrails, as you put it, to help us manage our days in a way that's going to create healthy parameters between, you know, our lives and our relationship to our devices. What are some of the guardrails that you would suggest, you know, we embrace if we're trying to have that nice balance between the two?
Yeah, so guardrails apply at a micro level to what we can do as individuals to create digital borders and boundaries, because tech has, let's face it, got its tentacles into every single part of our lives, professionally and personally. The other part of digital guardrails is at an organizational level, and there's things, we can park that conversation for now, but there are, I think, things organizations need to be doing to create those digital norms, digital practices and principles around sort of accepted behaviors around how we use technology. At an individual level, I think it's coming up with your boundaries. Where, when, how long will you use technology? You know, I often say to people, try to avoid bookending your day with your phone. First thing in the morning and last thing at night, huge impact on sleep, but also a huge impact on our stress level. When your brain is waking up in that transition between being subconscious and conscious, there's some magical things happening in our brain. And if you pick it up and you see one upsetting email, one concerning social media post or a news story, you've already activated the limbic response in your brain, with limbic region, and it's the stress response. So trying not to bookend it. Have you got some no-go tech zones in your house? You know, meal areas, bedrooms. If you've got children, you know, do you have designated spots where devices just don't go? So coming up with some of those parameters. Personal guardrails might mean when you're doing your deep focused work, can you put your phone somewhere where you can't see it? A study has conclusively told us that just seeing our phone, even if it is on silent and face down, has a huge impact on our cognitive performance. It literally is a brain drain. This one study estimated that our cognitive performance was impaired by around 10% just by seeing our phones, not picking it up, just in our line of sight.
Yeah, it draws us in.
It does. And it is, you know, our brain is partially attending to it. And so this has a huge impact on our performance. But again, we have to put some of those parameters in place. I also think if you've got partner, if you've got friends, if you've got family responsibilities, communicating what I colloquially call your tech expectations to others.
Yeah.
You know, like, don't send me 81 WhatsApp messages in the family group chat, because I'm not going to get to respond to them. If there's something urgent and critical, pick up the phone and call me. Do you know, like, coming up with some of those parameters so we're all clear on what it is. You know, if you hate text messages but you love a voice memo, like, communicate that.
Yeah, or vice versa, because it can be so annoying when you get a voice memo and you're like, don't make me take 30 seconds to listen to this when I could have just read it.
Yeah, and can I tell you, I changed my voicemail sometime last year when I was writing the book, because I just did not get around to listening to voicemails. It was my Achilles heel. Like, I will admit, really not good on my behalf. But I created a voicemail and I changed it simply saying, I'm really terrible at listening to my voicemails. Send me a text message. The number of people that sent me text messages saying what I was going to tell you wasn't that important, but I love this idea. It's had like this lovely contagion effect. And I have rung some friends and colleagues, and guess what? They've done the same thing. Like, share your tech preferences. Some of us hate email, some of us prefer email. Like, I think communicating your tech expectations can be really powerful.
Yeah, it's huge and it's really helpful. And one of the difficulties that you highlight here and also in the book is genuinely it is a relationship that we have to our phones, because if it's taking some of our attention, if we've got, as you put it, that kind of partial awareness of it at all times, it clearly, there's a psychological impact there, right? And there's that difficulty that we have of when a notification does go off, it can feel really good. It can, do all of the things that social media does with the dopamine and everything like that. So how do you deal with that side of things? Because I imagine for some people, turning off the notifications, that's almost like shutting down something that they enjoy.
Totally. So I have 3 golden rules for notifications. The first one, and I think we have to have an honest conversation. I think we have become attached to that. Our brains are wired for novelty. And when we get a notification on our phone, we never know, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Is it going to be exciting news? And so we get primed for that novelty factor. The other thing that we know is our brains actually cannot differentiate between a Teams notification or a TikTok notification and a tiger chasing us. They are both perceived because they come to us. We have ancient Paleolithic brains. We have brains that were biologically designed to go and get information. We used to go and hunt or forage or seek, but now we're having information constantly thrust at us, and huge amounts of information, I might say too. So with notifications, my 3 golden rules is turn off the non-essential. You've really got a question. Do you need every social media notification? I challenge people. I don't think we need email notifications. Like, we all know we get them. So I think turn off the non-essential. My second one is to bundle or batch your notifications. So with most apps or web tools now, you can now nominate what time or times of the day you want your WhatsApp notifications, you want your Instagram notifications, you want your email notifications. So they're not dribbling in throughout the day and distracting you. And my third recommendation is to create VIP notifications. So when you do put your phone on focus mode, or when you're on do not disturb mode, depending on your phone or your technology, everyone else gets blocked, but those people on that do not disturb list. So if you are working with a client on a critical project, if you've got a colleague and they'll need some instantly responsive posts, if you've got aging parents, if you've got young children, you have that peace of mind knowing that they can get through, but everybody else gets blocked. So I think there's some practical ways that we can get around that, because notifications have been engineered to trick us into thinking that every single one of them is urgent and important when they're not.
And when you shut them down, I know a lot of people will have done some form of digital detox or otherwise. You realise the contrast of those days where you've muted everything for a bit and you go, oh my goodness, life's actually a little more peaceful. It's not quite as stressful as it felt like it was when you have all these notifications. But you do also stress that a digital detox is not necessarily the way to remedy this, right? Because you kind of go, it's like yo-yo dieting. You kind of come in and out of it. So if we're not going to do a digital detox, is it as simple as having more of these routine practices, or do you still think there should be times where we're completely tech-free?
I think it's both. So I don't think the hardcore digital detox, go offline for 3 days or 3 weeks, is really a modern solution, because the reality is, we really still do need to use technology. My other concern, the research on detoxes tells us they often create a binge and purge cycle. So we go offline for 3 days, but then we come back on Monday morning and we deal with the barrage of emails or the barrage of notifications that we missed out on. So I think a more long-term sustainable habit is where we certainly come up with some of these guardrails, these digital borders and boundaries. And at the same time, we have to have designated times where we unplug, where we switch off. So I'm not saying you need to go offline for 2 days, but we need to have regular intervals, I think, even just for moments of time throughout our day where we unplug, where we switch off. Because we know, as we said before, this is where our good ideas germinate. This is when we solve complex problems. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. We used to call it daydreaming, but now it's so easy. We used to have white space naturally be built into our days. You used to get in the lift and you just daydream. You'd wait at the bus stop. In years gone by, you used to just stand there and wait for your coffee. But today, what do we all do? And I'm raising my hand here, guilty too of doing this. Every bit of white space we often have now, we pull out a device. We do something. So our brain hasn't become used to being idle, so much so that a study was done several years ago, and they put people in a room and said, we'd like you to just sit there and be bored for 10 to 15 minutes. They prematurely had to end the study because some of the adult participants showed signs of psychological distress. They couldn't handle being bored for 10 to 15 minutes. They repeated the study, and in iteration 2, they gave the participants of voluntarily administering a moderate to severe electric shock in lieu of their boredom. So same period of time, 67% of males, 24% of females gave themselves an electric shock in lieu of being bored.
Wow.
We have lost the art of being idle with our thoughts. And so I think now we have to actually be more intentional, saying to ourselves, could I go for a walk without my earpods in, listening to a podcast at 1.5 speed? Can I sit on the bus just maybe for the last 5 minutes, not for the whole trip, but maybe the last 5 minutes, I'm going to consciously choose to put it away and not do something. Can I go on holidays and go what I call laptopless, like go without my laptop? And maybe I do still want to check emails, but I'll check in on these times or these particular days. Because I think if we're not conscious about this, it is. We're seeing this, rates of stress and burnout are at incredibly high levels. And I think our tech habits are one. They're not the only reason, but they are certainly fueling that rise.
What do you think we miss in life if we don't have white space? Is it really necessary for people to have that?
Oh, yeah. I think we miss the micro moments of connection with our loved ones. I'm a mum and I sit at swimming lessons and I consciously choose that time not to pick up my phone. There are a myriad of things I could do, the emails, the grocery shopping, paying the bills, whatever, but I choose to sit there. I'm one of the few parents that sit there without a phone, and I watch some of these kids, they come up and they've finally learned the tumble turn and their goggles are filled with water and their cap's halfway off their head and they look up at their parent to give them the thumbs up, and their parents miss the moment. And these small things, and they are small, it's no big deal. And I don't want to suggest that we're psychologically ruining our kids, that didn't see every single thing. That's, unhelpful advice. But I think it's just those micro moments of connection with other humans. And I think, this is what makes up the tapestry of life. So I think it's, again, just being conscious of having some of that time and being aware of, we even know from studies that just the presence of our phone on a meal table, so at a dining table or a restaurant, changes the quality of conversation. We have much more surface level conversations if our phones are present on the meal table. So just making adjustments, recalibrations where we can, and it doesn't have to be perfect all the time, and we will get it wrong. I get it wrong frequently, and I'm not living in any sort of digital utopia, but I just think I don't want us to look back at the end of our life and think, I spent so much time on my phone. In the book, I share a sobering statistic at the beginning that it is estimated the average Australian will spend 17 years of their life on their phone. We don't get that time back. And, and in our defense, the technologies that we all use and love, social media, emails, online shopping, they have been deliberately engineered, deliberately designed to rob us of our time and our attention. And so this is why I think the new skill, the number one skill we all have to cultivate in the 21st century is our FQ, not our IQ, not our EQ, our capacity to focus, because we're living in a world that's been designed to take that away from us, and we won't get it back. Yeah,
it's difficult. One of the other statistics you mentioned is that the majority of adults spend 33% of our waking hours on our devices. And I think that's not even, that doesn't count Netflix necessarily unless you're watching it on your phone. That doesn't include the time that you might just be sitting at a computer screen at work. It's like the amount of time we're doing this for is kind of shocking. But I think as adults, at least in this generation, we've kind of got the benefit for most of us of we have a memory of time before, our world was so digitized and we had all of these devices. But for the, next generation coming up, kids and even everybody up to say 25 or so, they don't have that. It's very much a digital native thing. So if you're somebody who is a parent or you're looking after kids of that sort of age, How do you start to teach the qualities of critical thinking, of enjoying white space, all of these things to a generation that don't have a experience of it?
Yeah, you're spot on. I often say is kids today don't have a frame of reference. Like even parents don't have a frame of reference about how do we raise kids in this digitally saturated world. You know, as I can speak for myself here, I had a predominantly analog adolescence. I spent my leisure time staring at the sky, not at a screen. I spent time with people, not with pixels. But kids and teens today are having such different childhoods and adolescence. So my advice to parents is three things. The big message is that we have to be the pilot or the co-pilot of the digital plane. We have to help our kids navigate how to use tech, because they might have more technical skills than what we do as adults. I don't deny that. But what they don't have is life experience. They don't have hindsight and a catastrophe scale. So my three golden rules for parents is that we have to establish boundaries with, not on our kids. So we have to co-create boundaries, and the boundaries have to be more than just how much time. I think how much time will, the notion of screen time will soon become obsolete. And it's not the most important question. We need to have boundaries around when, what do they do, who can they connect with, where can they use devices, all those sorts of nuances. The big one, I think the big boundary is around what they can do and use. The second B is that we have to fiercely protect their basic needs. We have to make sure that their time online isn't eroding all the things that we know we need as humans. Are they getting enough sleep? Are they physically active? Are they connecting with real people? Are they sleeping? All those basic biological mechanisms. And the third B is being bored. Like, get them to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. They are going to hate it. They do not like it. They'll never ask you, hey, mum, could you set me up with some boredom? Like, it's never going to happen. But those three things, boundaries, basic needs, and boredom, are what will set kids up to thrive in this digital world. Again, it's not about taking away the technology, because if we ban it or we tell them that it's toxic or taboo, what we end up doing is driving it underground. Like, they'll go to a friend's house that has more relaxed rules. They'll start asking to go to a grandparent where they know they can use devices. They'll buy a decoy phone. Like, they'll find ways around it.
Yeah.
And I think our job is to guide them. But the hard bit is we're figuring it out as we go as well. Like, we don't have a handle on this yet. We're just as distracted and dependent, I think. But we often justify it under the guise of, I need it for work, or, you know.
Exactly. Our worst habits all, sort of tend to come out. But I think it's true. I'm assuming that for kids, this would be similar, that when you enjoy the experience of not having your phone around. Like, I think of friends that have had family holidays where they didn't have devices because they were out fishing or they're camping or they're enjoying life. And the kids genuinely go, this has been really nice. Like, they'll learn the enjoyment of it, and then maybe as they get older especially, be able to balance it a little bit themselves, right? Like, they'll see when their friends are all on their devices and go, I kind of enjoy when we're not for a minute.
Totally agree. I worked with some school camp providers a little while ago, and they said they were having high schoolers come to their school camps, and they had a strict no phone policy for a whole host of reasons. And they said it was interesting. The first 2 to 3 days, the kids were some of them visibly distressed and agitated. They were perhaps showing withdrawal signs, very frustrated and disappointed and angry. And then by about day 3 or 4 of the program, the kids seemed to relax. And by day 5, many of the kids said, I had no idea how much my phone and my tech was impacting me. I've slept better. Now, it could be because they're outside moving and doing other things, but there could be other variables, but I slept better. They noticed that the kids, first couple of days, there was a lot of awkward silences. Like, the kids often didn't know how to converse with each other. By day 5, they're conversing, nudging each other, like doing all the things we need. So I think, again, we've got to, our kids aren't going to ask for a holiday. Please take me on a holiday with no Wi-Fi connection, mum or dad.
Yeah.
They're not going to ask for this. We have to put them in those situations, I think. And again, through lived experience, as you said, they'll come out the other side and say, I've got tangible evidence that I feel better. Or had a different experience just by being, offline and unplugged for a couple of days.
Yeah, it's good for all of us in different ways. And I want to ask you, one of the things that I ask many guests, this podcast is called Undistracted. We talk about living in pursuit of your passions and purpose, and that does take a level of focus. That does take us being intentional about where our attention lies. What would it look like for you to live an undistracted life? If you could see, each of us at our best undistracted selves, what would that look like to you?
It would be having sustained periods of time where we can get into that beautiful flow state. I'm sure many of your listeners know that, when you just lose all track of time, you're doing work or leisure pursuits that you are engrossed with, and without any obligation of us needing to check in or use technology. Now, for some of us, we might be doing that on a device. So it's not you have to do it in an analog or an offline way, but it would be us having that locus of control and getting into those prolonged periods of flow state without feeling compelled. I'm hearing people say, Slack did a study in 2022, and they found a significant number of knowledge workers said that even though they were going to take their annual leave over the summer holiday period in 2022-23, 72%, I think it was, were acknowledging they'd still check their emails, even on their vacation. We feel obligated, and many say it's because I don't want to come back on day one after my annual leave to a bulging inbox. I don't want to come back and have to think about declaring email bankruptcy. So people feel like it's a never-ending treadmill. I think we're slaves to the screen in many instances. So a flow state would be not feeling almost like that unwritten contractual obligation that I need to be responsive and checking messages and replying. Loosening those boundaries, I think, would be really helpful.
Yeah, and you've given us so many helpful ways, practical ways to really get to that point. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time today, and encourage everybody to take a look at your book as well. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I do really value the way that Kristy approaches this conversation, because so often with the way we use technology, we can feel so guilty about it. We can feel shamed into thinking, being completely disconnected is the only way to have a healthy life. But it is just not feasible for so many people living in our very connected, very technology-heavy world. So I hope you valued today's conversation as well. Let me know what you thought of it. You can find me on Instagram at laura.bennett_. Also email undistracted@hope1032.com.au. Do check out Kristy's book. It is called Dear Digital, We Need to Talk. And until next time, enjoy living this undistracted life.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.